The final flicker of the neon sign above the gas station died, leaving the entire area in an unnatural, oppressive darkness, and Daniel felt his heart pound in his chest. The only noise left in the quiet was the faint ping of the fuel nozzle that was still connected to his vehicle and reverberated excessively loudly. However, even that sound started to seem stretched and distorted, as if it were no longer occurring in real time. Every breath he took felt like it scraped his throat because the air had become thick. After taking his phone out of his pocket, he switched on the flashlight. The beam could hardly penetrate the darkness due to its weakness. He froze as he pushed it in the direction of the pump. The numbers were gone. After being animated with digital figures, the pump screen was once again blank. When he touched the metal of the nozzle, which had ceased pumping, it was extremely cold. Much colder than the night should have permitted. There was a serious problem. The car was still locked, but his instincts told him to get out. He couldn't recall locking it. Slowly, as if someone was breathing heavily in the back seat, the windows were fogging from the inside. Lifting the flashlight, he aimed it at the vehicle. Nothing. No numbers. Not a move. However, the fog kept growing. Then he saw handprints on the windshield. The inside of the glass was pressed with tiny, childlike handprints. He almost dropped his phone as he staggered back. He turned, looking at the truck, the store, and the lot, and his breathing accelerated. Now the truck was nearer. It had moved, but not by much. A few feet forward, perhaps, where the gravel had not been a moment before, there were new tire marks. The driver's door was slightly open, and the windows were still blacked out. More out of desperation than logic, Daniel retreated toward the convenience store. There had been light, at least inside. A phone, perhaps a way to get in touch. However, as he got closer to the door once more, he noticed a shape standing in the glass's reflection. He initially believed it to be his own silhouette, but when he moved, it remained motionless. It was higher and thinner. There was a slight tilt to the head that suggested either hunger or curiosity. Nothing was there when he turned around. Except for the truck and the faded footprints in the dust, the lot behind him was deserted. However, the figure was still visible when he turned to face the glass. It was nearer now. Too near. He pushed the store door open with shaking hands. He was met with the same strange cold that sank into his bones. Long shadows stretched across the floor and vanished into the corners as the lights inside flickered in slower rhythms. The shelves appeared to be empty. A few had completely fallen. Others were filled with items he was unable to identify. Cans without labels, bags of something that moved a little beneath the plastic. A hallway that had not previously existed was now located at the rear of the store, where the counter had been. Long and narrow, it was illuminated by a single hanging bulb that swung back and forth, producing a gradual pulse of darkness and light. Daniel moved closer, drawn by a mix of morbid curiosity and fear. The store behind him moved as he approached the hallway, the entrance no longer where it had been, the aisles gently reorienting themselves. As he moved, it seemed as though the building was changing shape. Then he heard the bell once more. That gentle chime, now distorted, reverberated as though it originated deep underground, far below. He saw the old man once more as he turned his head toward the counter. This time, though, the man was on the ceiling, clinging to it like a spider, his eyes wide open, and he was looking down at Daniel instead of behind the counter. Silently, his mouth moved, then unhinged like a shattered doll, opening wider than it should have. A single, rasped word escaped his throat. Downstairs. Daniel spun around and ran. He just knew that he needed to get out, but he had no idea where he was going. However, the store had undergone yet another transformation. The windows had vanished. The front door had turned into a blank wall. The aisles looped back into one another and seemed to go on forever. He turned one corner and found another, running until he was out of breath. Then, abruptly, there was silence once more. The shop was no longer there. He was standing in a small corridor with cracked tile walls. There was a metal door at the far end that was half open and leaking faint red light. The first thing he smelled was decay, copper, and an old sour smell. He moved forward one step at a time. He didn't want to go further, but his legs moved on their own. The corridor closed behind him. The light flickered. The murmurs came back, louder this time, nearer. Additionally, the words, "No one ever," were written in a dark, dripping substance on the wall. Daniel froze, staring at the words scrawled on the tiled wall. Now the metal door's red light flickered violently, creating shadow pulses that moved across the dirty floor like living things. His shallow, sharp breaths echoed off the narrow corridor. The path he had come from was entirely gone behind him. There was only a solid, cracked wall in place of a doorway or hall. Panic snagged at his throat, but he was held in place by something colder and deeper. He wasn't merely confined. They were funneling him, herded, and he had been on the lookout for whatever was behind that red-lit door. Daniel took a deep breath and moved forward. Every step reverberated with an unearthly weight, as though the corridor extended below him. As he got closer, the door creaked louder and slowly swung wider without being touched. It was a round room with tall, cracked, dusty mirrors lining the walls. One old, splintered wooden chair stood in the middle, facing away from him, and he was sitting in it, or something resembling him. Daniel's posture, shape, and even the brown jacket he wore were all present in the figure. However, its hands were motionless on its lap, and its head was cocked at an odd angle. Additionally, Daniel saw different versions of this room in the mirror's reflection rather than himself. Other individuals. They all resembled him. Everyone is confined. They were all looking back with beseeching, hollow eyes. Some were yelling inaudibly. Others put their hands up against the glass as if they were attempting to escape. However, their actual bodies remained motionless in their chairs. With a sound akin to branches snapping in the winter, Daniel's double slowly turned its head. Its face was a warped reflection of his own, with hollow eyes, overly taut skin, and an inappropriate smile. It remained silent. All it had to do was raise a hand, and the mirrors answered. Daniel saw flashes, pictures, memories, moments, as the room trembled. Years ago, a different version of himself pulled into this station. Another version with blood on his shirt, rushing through the aisles. Another screamed as something invisible pulled him back into the darkness while he banged on the glass doors. And another Daniel in every mirror. One more soul. One more trap. It was home to something ancient. Something that thrived on decision-making moments. Daniel was beginning to realize that this gas station was not a structure. It was a threshold. A space between the real world and another. A hunger that pretended to be a fortuitous meeting. Not everyone who went in was unlucky. They were picked. Like a fish on a hook, it was dragged off the road. It was more than just cash. It was a sign of surrender, recall, identity. Daniel had also paid already. Across the room, his reflection started to move. Unnatural, jerky, twitching like a puppet with tangled strings. It got out of the chair and started to move slowly toward him, dragging its feet across the chipped tile. Above, the lights flickered. The red light grew brighter. Daniel retreated, but the door behind him was gone. Just mirrors. He spun around, desperately attempting to shatter the glass. He struck one panel with his fists, but it remained intact. Rather, the mirror moved, exposing a young, frightened woman who was also banging on her side. Then her image blinked, and another appeared in her place. An elderly man without eyes, a child crying, and a man yelling inaudibly. Here, they were all prisoners, ensnared in a never-ending web of reflections and moments of despair. The object that covered Daniel's face drew nearer. It raised a hand and gestured right at him. The ground suddenly collapsed under his feet. Daniel fell into the night and tumbled through the pitch-black air indefinitely. "You took the road that brought you here," was the last thing he heard before collapsing to the ground, as the wind roared past his ears. He was back in his car when he woke up. Over the desert, the sun was rising. In the distance, birds were chirping. Behind him, the gas station appeared deserted once again. However, "Paid in Full" was displayed on the pump. He clutched the steering wheel. He experienced coldness, hollowness, and detachment, like an unshakable dream. The impulse to drive, to get out, took over. So he did. Without turning around, he pressed the gas. He didn't dare look in the rearview mirror until he was miles away. However, the person staring back was not his reflection. The tilted head, the black eyes, the smile. It was that version of him. And one word was mouthed by it. Next.